This is the second section of the Ovid text where the gods are welcomed into their home by Baucis and Philemon. Therefore, when the heaven dwellers arrived at the small household and entered the lowly doorposts with heads bowed, the old man ordered them to relax their limbs on a couch which had been set out for them, over which the busy Baucis placed a rough woven cloth. Then she separated the warm ash in the hearth, and rouses yesterday's fires, and feeds them with leaves and dry bark, and brings forth to flames with the breath of an old woman, and brings down torches split into many pieces, and dry sticks from the roof, and makes them smaller, and applies them to a small bronze pot, and she strips a cabbage of its leaves, which her husband had gathered from the well-watered garden. With a two-pronged fork he lifts the sooty back of a pig which was hanging on a black beam, and cuts off a thin slice from the long preserved back, and having cut it up, softens it in the boiling waters. We begin then with the moment that the gods enter the home. Ovid opens with the word ergo, signalling that what follows here is the natural consequence of Baucis and Philemon's earlier act of hospitality. We then get a phrase that describes the gods. Ovid calls them Kylie Coli, right? So rather than referring to them as dei, gods, here we have the heaven dwellers, so some periphrasis. It reminds of us of their divine origin, even as they enter this tiny human space, right? And how is this space described? Well, parvos penates, right? The small household. The adjective small is separated from the household itself, creating this sort of visual split across the line that reflects the physical smallness of the whole home. And it reinforces one of the poem's central contrasts, this divine majesty with Penates and the humbly or the humbleness of the inhabitants, right, the Parvos. Next up, then, we have the gods entering and stooping as they enter through these low doorways. We get a moment of word painting going on. We can picture their heads bowed beneath the humble doorposts. The verb intrarent as well is sort of delayed until the second line, so a bit of enjambment from the previous one, placing emphasis on the gods' actions. Their divine status is made more powerful here with their humility as they enter. The focus then turns onto the couple, onto Baucis and Philemon. The old man invites the guests to rest their limbs, right? So taking some stress off. The word senex is how Philemon is described, right? So not just by his name, but by this word meaning old man. It reminds us of his frailness. So there's no display of strength or grandeur. This is just a quiet, respectful service from someone whose age makes his effort all the more impressive. And then Baucis immediately joins in, and she's referred to as Sedula Baucis, so a busy Baucis. Okay, her name is delayed right until the end of this line, allowing Sedula to stand out. Right, so the emphasis is really thrown on the fact that she's really busy looking after her guests. And what does she do? Well, she throws a textum rude. She throws a rough cloth over the couch, or a rough woven cloth. Rude, unrefined, draws our attention to the simplicity of what they have, so there's no luxury here, but there's pride and thoughtfulness in what they can offer. And then we get this lengthy description of Baucis rousing the fire, warming up the hearth. She stirs up the embers from the day before. If we look at that verb that's used as well, suscitat, a historic present, so drawing us right into this description, making it feel vivid and more immediate. And notice what she's doing. She's not just preparing the fire, she's reawakening it and continuing the warmth of the previous day. In this next bit as well, she's breathing flames, or sorry, she's using her breath to rouse up the flames. So she's literally pouring herself into rousing up the fire, right? She uses the breath of an old woman, okay? So anima anili. Notice that quite gentle alliteration that's happening, right, with the A's at the start of each word. It's almost like it's quite wheezy, as if she's literally breathing into it. And even though her breath is weak, it's effective, right? The moment captures her efforts. So old as she is, she gives what she can. Then we hear that she brings down some split torches and dry twigs from the roof. Notice as well, right, these are split up twigs, right, so multifidas, so quite carefully prepared. And look at how this phrase is. So multifidasque, remaliaque, we've got a nice balanced phrasing, so A, B, with the quays on the end. There's a nice sort of balance that's going on here. Now, Baucis hasn't just given her breath into these flames, so giving part of herself to them. She's literally taken down pieces of wood from the roof and used that to help the fire go. So she's giving part of herself and her house to make this place really hospitable, right, for her guests. She then takes some of the kindling that she's got and she makes it even smaller, minuet, so a lot of precision going on here, and then adding it to that small bronze pot. Okay, notice the parvo, a repetition of this parvus up here to deliberately emphasize how small her offering is to the guests. Let's look then at the food that's being prepared, right? We've got this cabbage that's being split of its leaves. Baucis is trimming these vegetables that her own husband had collected from the watered garden. Okay. I think using Suus here to talk about him, right? Her own husband adds some sort of closeness, right? That these two are sort of linked together. It's not just the husband, it's her own husband. And the description of that garden as well, riguo horto, not just any garden, but a well-watered one. So they take care of their things. They look after their homestead. If we then look at this vivid kitchen scene then, right, with Philemon picking up this bit of meat for them, the line is rich in detail. We've got sordida turgosuis, this dirty pork joint, which hangs from a negro tigno, a blackened beam. Now this is we've got a transferred epithet here. It's the beam that's black with soot, but the adjective negro is placed to modify tigno, right, directly. The word sordida highlights the poverty again, right, this word down here. It's not clean, fresh meat, but something old and slightly grim. But that's all they've got to offer, right? And they still are respectful of their guests. The next line then continues this realism. Philemon, cuts off a small piece of it. Okay. And Ovid also tells us that this meat has been kept for a long time. Okay, we look at that word down here, diu, a short word for a long time, or long preserved. The adverb stresses that this meat has been stored carefully. It's not luxurious, but it's what they've got, and they're willing to share it. If we look at that adjective as well, exiguam, a thin slice or a tiny slice, is significant. It reminds us again of their poverty. Think back to these two instances of parvus. Here's the other one down here. Lots of repetition of that idea of smallness, right? That they give only a little bit because that's all that they've got to give. Okay. Finally then, what does Philemon do? Well, he softens that cut piece in boiling water. Doma is a really interesting word that's used, right, for softens it up, right? Literally, he tames it, which is a surprisingly strong word for cooking. It elevates this act, treating the boiling of a small scrap of meat as something quite noble and deliberate. And then one further detail that stands out across this whole passage, look at how many different verbs are used, right? All these different blue words throughout here. It creates a sense of movement and effort and constant service. They're trying lots of different things to be hospitable to their guests. They're not simply being kind, but they're doing kindness step by step. And the final thing as well, other than all the verbs that happen, look at how many conjunctions are used, right? This polysyndeton throughout the entire passage. It doesn't really feel excessive, but it emphasizes the layering of all these small tasks. And it makes it feel like it's taking longer and longer, right, as you read it with all these different ands coming through. Right, the repeated joining of these actions slows down the rhythm slightly and draws attention to the completeness of their hospitality. No step is left out and no effort is spared for the guests.